Hello friends, welcome back to another Value Vintage Cards video. This one I want to focus a little bit on my two new pickups and really explain a little bit deeper why I was initially hesitant, and ultimately in reflecting, I'm really happy I decided to pull the trigger and make these two pickups. So the two pickups are a couple of really nice looking T207 guys named Harry. No, they're both really neat looking cards. Images really sharp. Grades are fair. Backs are clean. These are actually at the local card shop. The owner usually goes back to kind of the classic vintage, golden age, or whatever, the 50s, 60s. He does modern, he has packs, he's got all that stuff, but this was definitely rare for him to have. And so he was actually asking me, who are these guys? And I had to tell him a couple of them, Bresnahan's Hall of Famer, and he sent them in for grading. So he had them raw from a local seller. I think I identified everybody that was Hall of Fame, and I told him a couple of them were, just from knowing the hobby and knowing baseball history, I know some of the other names. So I was able to identify a few of them, and a few of them kind of surprised me when I kind of dug in and probably realized I should have known more about them as a baseball card collector, as a fan of the history of the game. And I almost feel like you become a historian. I don't necessarily know who was even president or some of those things at a given year, but I probably know who led the league in home runs, which is crazy. That's been my point of interest for so many years. But I wanted to show these two cards and kind of explain a little bit of my philosophy and theory. So I'm very much a player collector. I love picking up runs of players that I have interest in. Usually it's because they at least started on the ball field, but I usually dive in deeper, and I like to learn about them as a person and some of their reputation. So usually if I dig in, I find it interesting that Frank Baker helped research or recruit and scout for Jimmy Fox. I find it interesting that Christy Matheson was considered kind of the gentleman and had a different status with fans, and brought about an appeal for a different class of baseball fan. Those are the stories that for me make this really interesting and fun, and gives you more hours of reading than just picking up a card. So these two guys, Harry Steinfeld was the third baseman. He had a career, played for a couple different teams. Third base, I believe he played some second base as well, but most famously third base for World Series champion Chicago Cubs, which is not said often in history. But what's really cool is he was the third baseman for Tinker to Evers to Chance, which is, three Hall of Famers, very famous. When you just talk, if anyone knows baseball history, they know Tinker, Evers, Chance. Steinfeld was the third baseman, and actually, now that we have some different metrics and measurements, I want to say he was like 1,500 career hits, and 260s, 270s kind of hitter most of his career. A 30 WAR kind of guy, solid player, definitely good career, Hall of Very Good almost. So not Hall of Fame, but that's okay. And Harry Davis probably was closer. He was a high 30s WAR kind of guy. He played some first base, was with the A's, with several different teams. He was kind of, and I was corrected on this, he was like a precursor to the $100,000 infield. So he may have overlapped a little bit with Baker and Collins and things, but he wasn't necessarily part of that celebrated $100,000 infield. But 04, 05, 06, 07, he was a four-time league home run champion. So think about that. That's only been done, I believe they said 5 times. So when you have somebody that's done that, and obviously back then in that era, some of those years were 8, and maybe 12 was a huge year. But, dead ball, you still had to be, able to do it. I think he also led league in triples and doubles a couple of times. So he was, it wasn't a fluke. He was a prolific slugger his entire career. Went on to manage, did, several things. And it's interesting to see the stories of these guys from way back, because a lot of them have, shorter lives and different, other careers, business owners and salespeople and city councilmen, and you kind of start digging in and seeing who they really are, because back then you didn't make $4 million a year, so your retirement wasn't sitting on a beach. You're doing what you wanted. It was getting back to work and having another career. So just really, really interesting. But this got my brain moving and my juices flowing, and just thinking about these guys are not Hall of Famers, and they're outside the scope of who I would usually collect. I just thought the cards were cool, and chance to see them in person and pick them up, and learning some about their story. But think about how we got started. When I was a kid, 84, 85 was probably when I started collecting. So this was, I should have pulled the 86 Donruss Canseco too, but that was the epic card. And then this was that was off the charts. That was like, no one saw that even. I don't know if I saw that as a kid other than in Beckett. None of the local card shops had that. 83 tops traded. Are you kidding me? That was impossible. Those were the big cards. And then I used to spend summers in Atlanta. So Dale Murphy was the Braves. And when you're growing up a fan of a team, Rick Mailer and Bruce Benedict and Bob Horner, and Dale Murphy was the star, but you actually know some of the other players, Glenn Hubbard. They're just amazing, the amount of just thought you have towards those players and respect, even though they're not Hall of Fame. You see the card. I think I have, maybe 10 Dale Murphy rookie cards at this point. I like Dale Murphy a lot. And David Cohen, I've talked about in other videos as well. He might still get in, and Murphy might still get in, and Mattingly's got a chance. Strawberry had some additional issues maybe that will keep him out of the Hall, and maybe would have the least argument of all of them, I think. Murphy's 2-time MVP. Cohen has the career WAR, the Cy Young type seasons. He had no hitters, and so he had some different things. World championships. I still think Cohen should get in. And Mattingly, when you talk best first baseman, both of them really from my childhood, Keith Hernandez and Don Mattingly, neither one's in the Hall of Fame, which is insane. So that just kind of put a different perspective when I think about the old time guys, the Steinfeld and Harry Davis pickup. Both of those are probably in the same class as these guys. So rather than overlooking and saying not a Hall of Famer, not interested, they're common price, whatever, it really is fun to get to know some of the history of the game. And instead of saying it's common price and not Hall of Fame, say it's Harry Davis, 4-time home run champion, and Harry Steinfeld, third baseman of the 1908 World Champion Chicago Cubs with tinkered average chance. He's the forgotten fourth infielder, but pretty darn good player. So it's my 2 new pickups. That's a little bit of a weird insight into my mind and how I think, but love my Murphy and my David Cohn, and can't help but think about Strawberry and Mattingly, and I think about cards that were influential in the hobby when I was starting out. So glad to add Steinfeld and Davis to the collection. And if you guys collect, I always like to have kind of a little question and thought. And if you guys collect non-Hall of Famers, I feel like that's big with team collectors, because when you're a team collector, you kind of dive into someone that might have been significant. A lot of players have their number retired for the team, but aren't Hall of Fame or MLB kind of notoriety level. But just curious, any players, anybody you want to share, please share in the comments. Any players you collect that are non-HOF, they might be Hall of Very Good, or might even just be favorites from when you were a kid. So please share, and I will see you all on the next one. Have a good one.